Everything said on this podcast is entirely for entertainment purposes only. This is satirical and should not be considered clinical advice in any situation. Please use your own clinical judgment, using your own knowledge, expertise, and research. Consult with your local eye department if you are unsure, and always act in the best interest of the patient. Do not listen to the things that we say and take it seriously.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Glasses Half Full. Today we have a very special guest. You may or may not know who he is.
You definitely know who he is.
You probably know him if you've passed your pre-regs recently. We have none other than Abdul with us today, also known as the OSCEmaster. Abdul, how are you doing today?
Hello, very well. Thank you for having me, guys.
Very good, very good. So Abdul is the man behind the OSCEmaster. He runs all the sessions. So us as optometrists and pre-regs can pass our OSCEs. So let's just delve into the OSCE itself first, given that you're such an expert on it. Let's go to the basics. Back to the. Let's pretend that I have just started university. I don't know what the hell an OSCE is. I don't know what pre-reg is. Can you just tell me a little bit about what OSCEs are and how they kind of work?
Yeah, of course. So the OSCE is the final stage in your scheme for registration. So you've obviously got stage 1, which is made up of 4 visits, and then you've got stage 2, which is made up of your practical, your direct observations, and then your clinical case scenarios that you go through, and then you've got the OSCEs. So that's the final hurdle before you obviously gain qualification. The OSCEs are basically little scenarios, 5-minute scenarios, 16 of them in a circuit, where you're going to be assessed on different aspects of what you've learned throughout your pre-reg, really. So it can be testing your communication skills, your case history, your practical skills. So they'll all be assessed in this final assessment.
Very good. So with a lot of pre-regs, you kind of get, like, obviously you have your stage 1 stations and your OSCE. So you have a lot of pre-regs when they're starting out the stage 1s. They're kind of scared about the thought of the OSCE, because the stage 1, you have your kind of visits and they're just examining you on it. You have some more direct observations, and then the stage 2 is kind of like the same thing but all in one. But the OSCE seems like this very different kind of way of examination.
Yeah.
And how do you find it with pre-regs? Do they find it quite daunting? Is it as bad as it seems, as what people kind of imagine?
Yeah. With the OSCEs, I think the hardest part is actually the mental aspect, rather than the actual content and knowledge and what you're going to be assessed on. Because if you think about it, with the OSCEs, it's the build-up. So you got the build-up to the exam day. The day before, you're traveling to a different city. You're staying overnight in a hotel. Then obviously you go on the exam day to the center in an environment you've never been in, to carry out an exam where there's stations that you've no idea what can come up. So there's a lot of unknowns, and I feel that it's more like the stress, the exam nerves that can get the better of students. So I think managing and controlling that actually is half the battle. And students that can do that tend to just sort of perform quite well in the OSCEs. The content and what you actually assess on, I feel, is generally quite fair. It's sort of everyday scenarios that can come up in practice. It's conditions that can come up in practice quite often. It's not your vague conditions that you can find in the Kansky textbook. So it's conditions, pathology that you will have seen throughout your pre-reg period. And at the end of the day, the assessors and examiners just want to make sure that you're safe, that you can work and practice independently as well.
Okay. I'm really glad that you touched upon that, because in my conversations with other pre-regs, it was a lot of people thought stage 2 was the hardest.
Yeah.
But for me, and it was easily the OSCEs because everything you just said. Stage 2, I'm going back to my same room. I'm seeing the same staff, going into the same people, etc. They're coming to me. They're coming to, it's a home game. It's your home state
Yeah.
stadium, everything like that. OSCEs, it's, I came from Edinburgh. I came from Scotland.
Yeah.
I had to fly down,
You took a plane.
Exactly. It's hardly it's not the same commute. You had to fly down and it's in this clinical thing and you're filled with other stress at pre-regs, etc. And yeah, for me, OSCEs was by far the most stressful.
I mean, if you had a COVID pre-reg, I guess you could say it was even more difficult because you had a part of your stage 2 in your own house on a laptop, and then you had to take extra precautions when you went out for the OSCE. You had to mask up, you had to disinfect everything, you had to do all of these extra COVID precautions on top of the OSCE, which I think like made it even more difficult for other people.
I'd say the opposite. My COVID landed and it landed in my stage 1. So my fourth and final, I only did fourth and final stage 1 assessment was delayed until by like a year.
Yeah.
Every stage 1, stage 2 was all done in-house. So it wasn't at home on a laptop, etc.
Yeah.
It was at the clinic. But the OSCE, I benefited from, they had to clean and disinfect the stations.
Oh.
Abdul sure will remember this. They had to clean and disinfect the stations between each person. So instead of having your normal X length break, it was 2X break because we had a lot more time and that just gave us a bit more time to catch up, etc. So I think I actually benefited a bit from that. I wasn't lucky enough to know of OSCEmaster because I think that just having the extra preparedness, I think would have helped a lot because it's such an alien different scenario. So everything went well, alhamdulillah, everything went smoothly, but I think just the nerves part, just to put myself at ease a little bit more, I really benefited.
When I did the OSCE, I actually just beat the sort of COVID deadline. So I qualified. So I did the January 2021 OSCE, and that's the one I passed. And then after that, everything sort of went into lockdown, and there was a big delay for
January
the OSCEs.
2020.
Sorry?
January 2020. That's when you passed. Because 2021 was COVID.
Oh, was it 2020?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
It's
it
5
was.
years ago.
That was 2021.
Yeah, January 2020. So that was the last one, and then after that, I think they missed the March OSCE and the July OSCE.
Yeah.
And then it skipped to September because of obviously the COVID time. So I just squeezed my my qualification in.
Very good. Wow. How do you compare with like the knowledge that you need with the OSCE? So like how much like technical knowledge, like niche knowledge do you think you'd need when you're doing the OSCE in comparison to like stage 2?
Yeah. I'd say comparing the amount of knowledge you need in the OSCEs to stage 2, you probably actually need more knowledge in stage 2, to be honest with you. Because especially when I was revising, I found that with the OSCEs, yes, you need to cover all, as they say, the 75 elements of competence, the GOC elements of competence. But it's like you just need to know the surface knowledge for each topic. Whereas with stage 2, you need to know each topic, but at a deeper level. You need to know the ins and outs. You need to know the hows and whys as well. I'll just give you an example. Like if there's a scenario where you're having to cyclo a child. In the OSCEs, if you had this scenario, you'd probably be speaking to a parent. You'd have to explain, obviously, why you're doing this, what drug you're using, the side effects, how long it's going to take to work. Whereas if this was like a stage 2 scenario, you'd have to explain all that. But with your assessor, you'd have to talk about how this drug would work, what alternative drugs could be used, what are the contraindications of that. So it's like you need to know everything to more depth. Whereas I found with the OSCEs, it's just more the sort of surface level knowledge you need to know for each topic. It's still a lot to learn because you need to cover all aspects. But I feel for stage 2, it's just that extra depth that's required. I don't know how you guys felt in regards to that.
Well, the thing is, I kind of felt so. My stage 2 was quite knowledge, like it had a lot of like they went into really niche things. I don't know if it's because like I was doing well on that scenario and they kind of wanted to like dig in, but they came up with like some really like random things that I didn't even like from university kind of level stuff that like I've never touched on at pre-reg. Like they went into that kind of stuff, which got me really shook at the time. But then in my OSCE, I did get a couple of more technical stations that it wasn't something they weren't stations that you kind of find in your day-to-day practice as an optometrist. It wasn't as niche as the one on stage 2, but it was something that you didn't really use much of, like calculations and things like that. So I think in terms of knowledge, it was more heavily based on in a stage 2, whereas the communication aspect was very like I feel like out of like the 14 stations, like half of them were like communication based.
Yeah.
Which I think is a kind of a bit of a shock to me, not gonna lie. I expected like a few stations to be communications based, but I wasn't expecting like half or more of them to be quite communications based. I don't know about you, Smart. Maybe yours was a bit different.
Yeah, naturally, the difference with OSCEs and the stage 2 assessment is a lot of OSCEs is discussing with patients, etc. But everything that Abdul said in the beginning, I felt that as well. Stage 2, I felt was considerably more in depth, but I was a lot more familiar with what they would have asked me because they gave me time with the case scenarios, because I kind of knew what they'd be covering. With the OSCE, without going into too much depth with the stations, they covered a much wider breadth of area. And obviously, I was a lot more in the dark in what they were going to ask me. I didn't have any real indication prior to what it could be. So, whilst I don't think that they needed the same depth, nearly the same depth of knowledge, the breadth was much, much larger. So, it's just quite shallow, but quite wide. And I think that's the main difference. So, they did end up assessing everything there.
So Abdul, with the OSCE, obviously me and Usman felt that there was quite a bit of communication in. How do you see how important do you find that communication is as part of the whole OSCE examination process? How much of it do you feel like is reliant on good communication skills compared to how much you need to actually know?
Yeah, communication in the OSCE is vital. 90% of the stations will be communication based. I'd say the only stations that are pen and paper written would be like your referral letters, your calculations, whereas the rest of the stations, you're either speaking to a patient or you're speaking to the examiner. And in the OSCEs, it's not just about even what you're saying, it's about how you're saying it. For example, in scenarios where like you're breaking bad news, it's not just about what you're saying, it's the tone you're saying it in, it's your body language, being reassuring the patient, being empathetic. So that's all forms part of communication. So yeah, communication is vital. I always say with the OSCEs, it's not an exam where you can revise. It's not like a pen and paper exam where you revise from a book. It's something where you need to be practicing with, as it's often said, like friends, family, colleagues. It's all sort of vocal communication based.
Do you find that that's a skill that can be trained or is lacking a lot in a lot of the students that you have? Or how do you find people match up to this issue of having to communicate? Or do you think that through the pre-reg they practice this enough and they actually come in and they just need to be reminded of it?
Yeah, I feel generally students, it has improved since I first started carrying out OSCE sessions. Where students struggle on the communication aspect is them scenarios where they're having to break bad news, I find. Just that being that empathetic, that reassuring voice, because we need to remember that you're speaking to another patient, even though they're actors and it's all a made up scenario, they're not robots. So they're actual actors. So whatever you say, you need to say it in the sort of correct manner, the correct tone. And again, these are everything the examiners that will be looking out for.
Yeah, and breaking bad news, as I'm sure we've all had the misfortune of having to do, is something that is such an important skill to have, because those conversations where you need to be able to adequately inform somebody of something that they didn't want to hear, whatever it may be. So yeah, that really, really important to assess that.